I just finished Xenoblade Chronicles 3 a few days ago, and with that being the conclusion of that trilogy of games, it really got me reflecting on my experience with the series, and as well as just video games as a whole. Beating Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition about a month ago, and then Xenoblade 2 a while back, both had me feeling a similar way after the credits rolled as well. This is because these games do something that I never really thought I wanted out of video games, and that's that they tell a compelling story. A story that made me care about the characters. A story that made me laugh and cry, made me feel unstoppable as well as weak and powerless. Felt struggle and anguish as well as the triumph of overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles. These games really made me feel. Reflecting on my experiences with these games really got me thinking about how 5 years ago, I never really would have considered playing Xenoblade or any RPG or story-driven game. It really got me thinking about the path that I took in terms of the games I played, and the defining experiences that led me to JRPGs and the Xenoblade series, which is safe to say my favorite video game series at this point. So that's the story I'll be telling you all today. How I went from not an RPG guy to a guy who won't shut the hell up about Xenoblade. After hearing that intro, this should come as no surprise to you, but as a kid, I didn't really like RPGs. By the time I was old enough to start playing video games, our family owned a Nintendo 64 and an original Xbox. When it was time to sit down and go gamer mode, it was always either a party or an arcade style game. Something like Battle Tanks, Mario Kart 64, Super Smash Bros., GoldenEye 007 split screen on the N64, or something like Burnout 2, Tony Hawk, and when I was a bit older, GTA Vice City and San Andreas on the original Xbox. These games form the bulk of my earliest childhood gaming memories. When me, my brother, my dad, and sometimes even my mom would sit down to play some of these games, needless to say it wasn't for their story content. All these games were meant to be played for the pure fun of it. Yeah, a lot of these games have stories, and some of them were even pretty good, but we weren't really playing San Andreas to follow the damn train and track down the green saber. We were playing to spawn a shitload of guns, steal a shitload of cars, and go on the craziest crime spree possible before eventually dying and passing it on to the next person for them to do the exact same thing. This style of gaming formed the idea in my head of what I thought was possible in a video game, and the things that I wanted out of my video games that I played for much of my life. I mean, sure, we owned a copy of Ocarina of Time, but my 5-year-old brain couldn't comprehend or care about anything that was going on in that game. When I loaded up that 50% completed save file that was already on the cartridge when we bought it, I couldn't figure out what the hell I was doing. I was just walking around the area, thought it looked kind of cool, but when it came to do literally anything else, I didn't know what was going on, and it didn't take long before I swapped out the cartridge for Super Smash Bros. Instead. Fast forward to the end of middle school and the beginning of high school. Around this time is when I would start considering video games to be my main hobby. I had newer consoles and a PC, but this didn't really change the kind of games that I was playing. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and 2, GTA 4 and 5, and Team Fortress 2 were by far the games I was playing the most. And you might think to yourself, hey, GTA 4 and Black Ops 1 have great stories. To which I would respond, hey, you're probably right, but I wouldn't know. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but we never came close to beating GTA 4. I still have it to this day, and I don't really know what happens in that story. But I did beat Black Ops' story once, and even though I thought it was really cool, it was far from the main reason I was playing that game. I beat it once, and never played the campaign again, but played the hell out of multiplayer. Call of Duty and TF2 ushered in a new era of gaming for me. These games introduced the concept of online multiplayer games and the concept of really being good at video games. And from here on out, this is pretty much what I seeked in the games I was playing. I still thought they were fun, but I was looking for games that I could improve and compete in as well. Once I discovered CSGO around the middle of high school, it was pretty much the only game I would ever play for literally years. My friends and I would play for hours on end every single day after school, competitive match after competitive match. I don't think this was necessarily a bad thing, because I did have a lot of fun playing this game, and it served as a much needed distraction through some of the toughest years of my life. But it was at this time I was playing the fewest amount of other games. The only variety in what we played was Overwatch when that game first came out, and the occasional rage-filled romp through a few courses of golf with friends.
Give me a break! Give me one break! I'm gonna lose. I bet Lucas is gonna catch up to me. God!
Throughout this whole time from being a kid to after high school, I had tried a couple RPGs here and there and even really enjoyed a few of them. Two standout titles that I remember playing a lot were Custom Robo Arena, which is a mech arena fighter for the Nintendo DS, and Fable 2 and 3 for the Xbox 360. I didn't really play these games for their stories though. I did like them, but I was really just in it for the gameplay. Even though I enjoyed these games, other RPGs were never really fun to me, especially those with turn-based combat, and especially those based in medieval fantasy settings. A little while after high school, my living circumstances changed and I had to move. I moved to a couple different places during this time, but both of them had, let's just say, sub-average internet. Download speeds were abysmal, and it would take days, even sometimes weeks, to download a new game. But that wasn't really the hard part for me. The hard part was the ping. Terribly high ping meant I couldn't play the games like CSGO and Overwatch that I used to play all the time with my friends. At this point, games were really my only hobby, and online with friends was the only way I would play. And suddenly that was no longer an option. That was really hard for me to deal with for a while, but eventually I started very slowly downloading and playing some of the games in my Steam library that I had picked up on sale or for free, but never really played. One game in particular opened my eyes and made me realize what video games could be outside of just online multiplayer games or arcade-style games that I played for fun. And I tell you this in confidence, so please don't make fun of me. But that game was none other than Bioshock Infinite. Now, I know that this game is very divisive and it has many problems. And I'm not really the one to talk about these problems. I experienced the game once shortly after high school, and I was blind to most of these problems at the time, as I had never really experienced anything like Bioshock Infinite before playing it. So sorry to all you Infinite haters out there, but you're gonna have to hear someone talk about Infinite positively for a little bit. Bioshock is essentially, at its core, still Call of Duty. You run around killing enemies with guns before they can kill you with guns. It's a simple gameplay loop, and it was comforting to me, as first-person shooters were all I really played for a really long time. Plus it added magic and ziplining to the equation, so I was all about it. But it added something more than that. Something that my primitive gamer mind wasn't familiar with. It was a compelling narrative, and characters that I could care about. Playing through the game and getting to know Elizabeth as a kind, caring, and helpful person really got me attached to her. Watching the relationship between her and Booker grow and evolve made me care for these characters in a way that no other game had even come close to at that point for me. At this point, I will get into some spoilers for some side stuff and the ending of Bioshock Infinite, so if you care at all, please go ahead and skip ahead. In particular, there's one moment. I think it's in like an optional hidden area. I can't quite remember, but after you kill some people in a bar, you can go downstairs in that bar and you see a kid run under the stairs. And in that room, you also see some apples and a guitar and some ammo pickups or whatever. You can walk over to the guitar and pick it up and start playing it. And Elizabeth will start singing a verse from Will the Circle Be Unbroken while she hands the kid an apple.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by, by and by, is a better home awaiting in the sky, in the sky.
This simple moment had such an impact on me, not only because of the song and the significance it has on the story, but also the way it connects you to Elizabeth and the connection that Booker and Elizabeth have. And I know a lot of people have issues with the ending of the game, but when it turns out that Booker is also Comstock, and you have to let yourself be drowned by a bunch of Elizabeths who are also your daughter in order to break the cycle, That blew my goddamn mind as someone who had never been affected by a video game like this before. Despite everything, I will always look back fondly on this game and what it made me feel. But once I got a taste for it, I wanted more. And that's where this next game comes in.
Bayonetta.
At this time, I was trying a myriad of different games. I had a Switch, and the fastest way to experience a new game was to go to GameStop and buy the cartridge rather than waiting for a digital download on PC or Switch. So I was buying up anything that looked remotely interesting, and one of the times I went into GameStop, I picked up Bayonetta 2. I can't really remember what drew me to this game. I don't think I'd really heard of it before, and I think the main reason I picked it up was because if you bought it new, it also came with a download code for Bayonetta 1. And 2 games for $40 seems like as good of a deal as any, so I went for it, and I'm glad I did. This isn't one of the games I'd consider that put me on the course towards RPGs specifically, but it did introduce me to Platinum Games, who are now one of, if not my favorite game developers. The story is hard to follow and a bit janky, especially the second one, but the music, art, and gameplay are all so flashy and over the top and fantastic, it's hard not to fall in love with these games when you play them. I beat them both pretty quickly, and that was that, but I was definitely going to remember the name Platinum Games from here on out. Fast forward a little bit, looking through Steam, I come across this game, NieR Automata. I had heard the name, heard some gaming YouTubers talk about it very positively a couple of times, but I didn't really know anything about it. Clicked on the Steam page link, saw it was developed by Platinum Games, saw a couple GIFs of the gameplay, and yeah, that was enough to do it for me. I think I'm gonna pick this one up. And so I put it on my wish list, and once it got on sale, I went ahead and bought it and downloaded it. And holy shit. Despite the impact it had on me and the way it completely changed how I view both video games as a medium and fiction in general, I'm not going to talk about it much here. The thoughts I have on this game could fill a book, or at least a podcast-style video essay, so I'm not going to talk about the bulk of my thoughts here. I'm going to go ahead and save them for another time. And I'm also not going to spoil anything about NieR Automata in this video. Don't worry about that. Please, if you have any interest in this game, consider this a personal request. Play that game all the way through, all 5 endings. You will not be sorry. NieR Automata is a masterclass on introducing you to a world and characters, getting you to care about those characters, getting you to think you understand the world, and then betraying all of that and more in order to blow your mind in a way you've never thought it was possible before. It gets you to feel more feels than you thought were ever possible before. I could talk for hours just about how much I love this game, but the important thing to get across for this video is how it impacted the way I look at games and what I look for in choosing games to play. If Bioshock Infinite showed me that games could have compelling narratives, NieR Automata showed me that games could be among, if not the most impactful way to experience these narratives. Once you've experienced the whole thing, you realize Automata is an experience that can only be provided through a video game. I can't say much more without spoilers, but I'll say that you could tell Automata's story in a book, you could show it in a movie, but you could never get the experience it's trying to provide in either of those mediums. Video games is the only way that story could have been told. Even if other games don't quite reach the level that Automata did for me, it made me realize that games could be a very impactful way of telling a story because of the way you experience them. You're not just watching the main character, you're not just reading about the main character, you are the main character. Some games do this better than others, but all games with a story do this to some extent, and it can be a very powerful thing. NieR Automata also made me consider JRPGs as a genre that I might be interested in. I'm not here to argue genres. I don't think Automata is a JRPG in the strictest sense because of the gameplay. It's really more of an ARPG or a hack and slash, but it is a game where you assume the role of a character and it was created in Japan. so JRPG it is. I knew that I didn't like turn-based RPGs, but I was beginning to find out that that's not really the only option for RPGs, and that some turn-based systems can actually be pretty fun. At this point in the video, it's worth noting that me and my friend who played Smash a lot at the time were always talking about JRPGs, but not in a positive light, but as the butt of our jokes. We were Smash players, so naturally we knew about Fire Emblem and how we thought there were way too many blue-haired anime swordsmen in Smash. After Byleth was released for Smash, it was, I think I'll go ahead and play Fire Emblem Three Houses. Can't be that bad, right? Nintendo makes it. Nintendo makes good games, so it's gotta be good, right? Well, I still have never played Fire Emblem, but eventually I bought something even worse. Atelier Ryza is a quaint little RPG about a girl who learns alchemy, and eventually uses that power to save her hometown island from the threat of an underworld invasion. That might sound a little intense, but I've learned it's got relatively low stakes as far as these things go. No one kills or even becomes a god, so automatically it's less intense than a lot of JRPGs out there. Most of the game, however, you are unaware of this underworld threat, and you simply learn how to grow your skills as an alchemist as you and your friends discover what you truly care about during your transition from childhood to adulthood. It's cute, it's quiet, it's heartwarming more often than not, but I don't really care to talk about the story. This is not one of those games that blew my mind, not one of those games that made me cry, not really one of those games that made me feel. What this game did do, however, was arguably far more important than any of those things in terms of my own enjoying of JRPGs. This game made me embrace and enjoy menus. Menus are the bread and butter of any traditional JRPG. Need to buff up your character? Equipment menu. Need to go somewhere? Fast travel menu. Need to fight a god-slaying dragon? Here's your combat menu, sir. May I suggest fight or magic this evening? Now, Atelier Ryza's combat isn't traditional turn-based, but rather time-based. Basically, every participant in the battle has a timer, and they can't act until that timer hits 0. Depending on what actions you take, what gear you have, and what buffs and debuffs you have, your timer either goes faster or slower. This definitely isn't any kind of combat that I was used to, but to me it was a lot more engaging than a typical turn-based fight. Sometimes you'd hit a perfectly timed move, or sometimes a boss would start charging a special and you had to work to daze him right before his timer was up, which, if you didn't, would wipe your squad with whatever OP move you were just meant to prevent. This combat isn't really what made me like menus, though. See, combat isn't the only thing you do in Atelier Ryza. In fact, it takes up a pretty small amount of what you actually do in a playthrough compared to the meat and potatoes of this game: gathering and crafting. Remember when I said Ryza is a girl who learns alchemy? Well, alchemy isn't just a plot point, it's also a core game mechanic. In this game, you can just grind enemies and buy equipment from the gold you get, just like any other RPG, but you'd be pretty dumb for doing it. The real way you'll be upgrading your equipment in this game is crafting it using all of the items you've gathered in the world as well as in fights. I wasn't sure about it at first, but I absolutely fell in love with the crafting system in this game. I won't get too much into the mechanics of the system as it's not really the point of this video, but what you need to know is that it's a system that's simple on the surface, but it has a good amount of depth to it. As a player, you can pay as little or as much attention to this system as you'd like. You can either handcraft each item, paying attention to every minute detail and stat, or you can just let the game do it for you. This freedom of being able to choose exactly what you wanted to do is what got me hooked on this crafting menu. At first, I was just letting the game craft my items for me. What's the point of doing this myself if the computer can do it? Probably better than I could, I thought. But as I got further into the game, collecting better and better ingredients and fighting harder and harder enemies, I decided I should probably try to craft my own stuff to maximize what I was getting out of these rare ingredients. The rest is history. Deciding you need a better item, going out to collect high quality ingredients, crafting that item to maximize the stats that you want the most, crafting your own super high quality ingredients to make even more overpowered items, was a gameplay loop that I never really got tired of, even now as I have over 100 hours in the sequel and still haven't even beaten it because I keep getting looped into side quests and crafting fevers. But remember, I wasn't supposed to like RPGs at this time, especially anime-inspired JRPGs. I militantly hid this from anyone and everyone. I kept my Switch Online notification off, I disabled anyone from being able to look at my play history, and I would only play this alone, usually at night. I was embarrassed to be a fan of it, and I would not let this go until much later. After I completed Atelier Ryza and started playing the second one, I was more confident than ever to jump into a brand new JRPG experience. I thought if I enjoyed that anime-ass game, filled to the brim with menus and stats, and Japanese-only voice acting, surely I can enjoy any RPG on the market at this point, right? So, whenever I went to GameStop, I would keep a little bit more of an open mind than I would in the past as I sifted through the wall of Switch games. And time after time, one case would catch my eye. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I can't tell you what drew me to this game, because I still don't really know. Was it the beautiful art of the Mechonis and the Monado on the cover? Maybe. Was it the fact that I vaguely knew Shulk because of Smash? Perhaps. Was it fate? More than likely. But the third or fourth time I picked up that case to read the back and gaze at the front cover, I finally walked out with it. $60 poorer, and ready to experience this new world, I drove home, popped the cart in my Switch, and was enchanted by that title screen. The serene, endless grassland pierced by the Monado, the clouds rolling delicately as day fades to night, gentle pianos tinkling in the background. I was in awe. And then I didn't like the game very much. So this is where part 1 ends. Part 2, maybe even part 3, considering I just finished Xenoblade 3 and I have a lot to talk about on that. Those parts are going to focus exclusively on my experiences with the Xenoblade series. I promise I do end up liking the game and all of the games, and it's not just a bait and switch. It's just that my experience with the Xenoblade series had a pretty rocky start.